Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I love doing this channel. I love being able to do this hard work to capture all these things that we're seeing in the news, putting them on timelines, analyzing what we're seeing. And there's just so much stuff that I think would go under the radar unless we had something like my spreadsheets to put it all together and see the big picture. So there's this article that came out. It's called President Holland Laid to Rest as New Year Rings In with Rain in St. George. As soon as I saw this, rain in St. George, I knew that something special was going on. I have a spreadsheet called Signs Church Specific, and there's all these things throughout church history that seem to be church specific signs. And there's a special category just for rain that I have this blue color for that you see right here. We're going to review this, and I'm going to show you why I think this is special, this whole thing with rain on the day that President Holland was buried, and other surprising times that we've seen rain events. And we're going to talk about coincidence, and we're going to talk about just all sorts of stuff. So before we do, I've updated the Book of Mormon Challenge spreadsheet for the second time. We are now at 24 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared. We're trying to get to 10,000. That's what we did last time when we did this. This is the Flood the Earth Challenge. I want to replicate this, and I know that we're going to do it. So 24, we have 18 participants so far. I've failed to mention, I want to have the same goal as last time, where each of us individually the goal is to try and share at least 10 copies of the Book of Mormon. But don't stop there. Share as many as you can. I plan on going well beyond just 10. But could you imagine, out of all the subscribers that I have right now, like 43,000, if everyone shared 10 copies of the Book of Mormon, we would be close to 500,000 copies of the Book of Mormon shared. So please try and do that. And it won't be too long before we start seeing people getting baptized, because that's what happened last time. And I don't think that this time is any different than last time. So please share the gospel. Use your gospel library app, go to scriptures, and you'll see a banner at the top to share the Book of Mormon app. This is the easiest way to share the Book of Mormon. Good job, everybody. Okay, so let's go to this article and read some of it. St. George, Utah. New Year's Day in 2026 in St. George, Utah brought much needed rain to the desert community of southern Utah. So it's interesting that it came on the day that he was buried in St. George, where he's from. For David Holland, son of the late President Jeffrey R. Holland, the rain was a poetic send-off for his father. Quote, "My dad absolutely loved to take a drive in the rain, and he loved to drive around in his beloved St. George. I cannot imagine anything more fitting than the fact that today he got both," David Holland said, speaking at the burial of his father the morning after President Holland's funeral was held in the Salt Lake Tabernacle. And honestly, who doesn't love driving around in the rain? I love the rain. Of course, I don't want it every day. I'll probably never move to Seattle or any place like that. But yeah, I love it when it rains. I love this picture right here with the hearse and the St. George Temple in the background. This is a temple that I have not been to. I grew up in Utah. I'd been to southern Utah plenty of times, but I've never been through it. Is this your temple? Let me know in the comments below. Love those palm trees. I miss southern Utah and Arizona and Vegas. Missionaries from the Utah St. George Mission lined the road in front of the temple and sang Amazing Grace together as President Holland's hearse passed them. It's interesting that happened. We talked about this recently because in President Holland's last talk in the October 2025 General Conference called And Now I See, He sung that song, or he sung part of it at the very end, just before saying, "In the name of Jesus Christ, amen." And I'm wondering if it's because he knew he was going to pass away, and maybe not because it was revealed to him, but maybe he just knew that the state of his health was such that he probably wouldn't live until the next general conference. Um, but I still think it's really interesting that's what, I don't know that that's happened before in church history. He did so many interesting and unique things, and this is one of them. Earlier in the talk, and this goes along with what we're talking about today when we're talking about coincidences and signs and prophecy and the way that the Lord works. Let's just review this really quick. Another truth that is evident here are the instruments the creator of heaven and earth and all that in them are used to provide this miracle. Spit and a handful of dirt. This, of course, is when Christ healed the blind man. These very unlikely ingredients declare that God can bless us by whatever method he chooses, like Naaman resisting the River Jordan or the children of Israel refusing to look at the serpent on the staff. How easy it is for us to dismiss the source of our redemption because the ingredients and the instruments seem embarrassingly plain. Later on, I'm just going to skip down. So what if the answers to our prayers come in plain or convoluted ways? And by the way, I think that you can apply this again to signs of the times, prophecies, and just the way that the Lord communicates to the world, to the church, or like he's saying right here, to you individually. So what if the answers to our prayers come in plain or convoluted ways? Are we willing to persevere to keep trying to live Christ's gospel no matter how much spit and clay it takes? It may not always be clear to us what is being done or why, and from time to time, we will all feel a little like the senior sister who said, "Lord, how about a blessing that isn't in disguise?" So, this whole thing with rain in St. George, it may just highlight his passing. It may be a sign to individuals that were in St. George, his family, friends, and maybe the church. Maybe it's the Lord showing his satisfaction over President Holland's service. I don't know. It's probably something along those lines. Later on, here you have a picture of Elder Uchtdorf. At sometime soon, he's going to become the acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. In fact, let's see. I have that spreadsheet pulled up. So this is my spreadsheet that has all the apostles since the restoration of the church. So the senior apostle is the president of the church. And the next most senior apostle is president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Before President Nelson passed away, President Oaks was the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, but he was serving in the first presidency. And so President Holland was acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. When President Nelson passed away, President Oaks was now the senior apostle and became president of the church. And next in seniority was President Holland. And President Holland was not called into the first presidency, and so he became the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. So now he's passed away, and so if we look here, we have Henry B. Eyring, who is next in seniority. So he is president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, but he is serving in the first presidency, and therefore the next most senior apostle is Elder Uchtdorf. And it still hasn't happened yet, but he will be set apart as acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And then you have President Christofferson down here, which is, he's a few spots below Elder Uchtdorf, but that's how it goes. So our next acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles is going to be President Uchtdorf. Okay. Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles offered a tender and heartfelt invocation to open the graveside services. And I'm guessing he was chosen for that probably because he's going to become the next acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Attending the funeral amidst heavy rain, so this is a new detail, it was heavy rain, that subsided as the program began. I should have highlighted that. We see this so many times where you have rain and then the rain lets up before an important event happens. Attending the funeral amidst heavy rain that subsided as the program began were many of President Holland's family members, neighbors, friends, and quorum members. So here we have President Oakes and his wife. And then it just notes that President Eyring was there, President Christofferson. Let me know if you were able to attend this funeral. I'd be interested to know. Okay, so I've added this to a couple spreadsheets. First, my spreadsheet called Timeline Second Coming. I don't know why I didn't add this last time, but so his funeral was on New Year's Eve, which that by itself is really interesting. It's interesting he went to the hospital on Christmas Eve, then he passed away on the 27th, and we've noted all the different things about that. President Nelson passed away exactly 3 months before, and right in between their two death dates, you had the aurora that was seen throughout the United States, exactly in the middle, and then there were other interesting things. Okay, and then his funeral was at the Salt Lake Tabernacle on New Year's Eve, and then on New Year's Day is when he was buried. So that's just really interesting. Christmas Eve, New Year's Day. And then you have this thing with the rain. Oh, and I guess I should point out, the day that he passed away, temperatures in Utah plummeted because there was a cold front that came through. So before that point, it was unseasonably warm. I did a video about that, talking about how in Salt Lake there were trees that were starting to bloom because the plants were confused. They were basically experiencing springtime conditions. Christmas Day was the warmest on record. And then a couple days later, President Holland passed away and temperatures dropped. And now, on the day that he was buried, you had this much needed rain, and it was heavy rain in St. George. Okay, so I don't think that that's coincidence. And we're going to talk about coincidence in just a minute. I have a collection of quotes I want to share with you about coincidence. But before we get to that, I also added this to my spreadsheet called Signs Church Specific. And let me just show you some of the other times that we've seen these rain events, these signs having to do with rain. So the first one that I have goes back to April 6th, 1853. Good weather on the day that the cornerstones of the Salt Lake Temple were laid. And we have this from President Brigham Young, Journal of Discourses, Volume 1, page 132. From the day that he fell until this day, if there is one item of business, if there is one thing that should have been done by this people that has not been done, I cannot call it to mind. Though it looked gloomy for a month or 6 weeks past, the weather being so unfavorable with regard to being ready to lay those cornerstones today. I'm happy to say that there has been a great deal of faith manifested by the saints, and through that faith the Lord has granted unto us the desire of our hearts, or else the devil has been sent on an errand another way and has forgotten himself. I do not think, however, he need trouble himself much about the world, for he has them secure enough. Perhaps he may have slept a little too long, as he has not been here on this notable day. I attribute it to our Father in heaven for giving us this beautiful weather today. So again, the cornerstones of the Salt Lake Temple. The next one is August 5th, 1953. site dedication and groundbreaking for the Bern, Switzerland temple. Credit goes to my viewer, Sarah Nick. This was talked about in a Deseret News article right here. Here's the quote. Rain had been falling for weeks, but ceased in time for the services. And wasn't that the first temple in Europe? I believe it was. Let's just double check. Bern, Switzerland temple, first in Europe. Need to double check this. Yes, the Bern, Switzerland temple was the first temple. And yep. So don't think that that's coincidence. So we have the Salt Lake temple. We have the Bern, Switzerland temple. Okay, the next one, the Independence Visitor Center dedication. You can find this. Let's see. This is in an Ensign article, August 1971. The First Prophet of the Last Dispensation by Joseph Fielding Smith. And in that article, it says, services were held outside, accompanied by much thunder and lightning, but only a drop or two of rain. As soon as the services were completed, a drenching rain began to fall. Now, this is interesting because the Independence Visitor Center, like I've said so many times, was built to be a visitor center, but it was also built to be one of the temples of the 24 temple complex. The Lord revealed the dimensions of those temples to Joseph Smith, and this building was built according to that revelation, those dimensions. So I don't know like exactly how it's going to happen. I would imagine at some point it's going to be renovated. It probably won't look like this because the plans for the temple or for the temples is on the Joe Smith Papers website. And those temples look like the Kirtland Temple. So I'm assuming that's probably what they would do here. But essentially, this is a temple in waiting. It's a temple in waiting. And you have another rain event where they were able to do the dedication. Even though there were stormy conditions all around, they were able to do the dedication. There was somebody in my last ward when I was living near Wichita who had attended that event, and he told me all about it, that it really affected him in the moment. But this is a picture that I got earlier this year. You can't really see it, but there's a rainbow right here. This is on my Facebook account. This was an incredible day. I like this video right here at the temple lot with this rainbow going over. There's the visitor center in the middle. And then on the 5th of July, this was so fun. There's the visitor center right there. On the 5th of July, the church puts on a fireworks display on the grounds of the Independence Visitor Center because you have all this open area. And there were so many people there. And it was so fun. It was a good family activity. I would highly recommend it. Okay, let's go back. So we've talked about 3 temples now: the Salt Lake Temple, the Bern, Switzerland Temple, and then this temple in waiting here in Independence, Missouri. Okay, April 6th of the year 2000, temporary sunshine and calm from rain. This was for the dedication of the Palmyra, New York temple. It says there had been snow the day before the dedication, and the 6th of April began with heavy rain and chill, but bright sunshine broke through the clouds before President Hinckley and others involved in the cornerstone laying stepped out of the temple for that part of the program. After the cornerstone ceremony, when the church leaders had gone back into the temple, the weather turned blustery, leaving representatives of the news media commenting on the timing of the temporary calm and sunshine. So that's really interesting. And on that same day, you had this event. I don't know if this was the same as what we've been experiencing over the last couple of years, but you had an event called the Great Aurora and Geomagnetic Storm of 2000, April 6th through 7th. And we all know that this was a very important event as well. It was done on April 6th. There's not too many temples that were dedicated on April 6th. President Hinckley said that this was perhaps the most important temple of the church. I have that quote somewhere. Okay, and then September 15th of 2018, now President Nelson is president of the church at this point. Rain postponed. President Nelson spoke at Seattle's Safeco Field to 50,000 members of the church. President Nelson said that, quote, the rains had been delayed by faith. And then May 18th of 2019, this is President Nelson again. Quote, yesterday's visit with the saints in Samoa was a blessing and evidence of their great faith. The forecast promised rain, but just after the opening hymn, the rain ceased. It was remarkable, even as if their faith turned off the rain. So 2 years in a row, and these are President Nelson's own words. So you see why, when I see something like this with President Holland, a headline like this, President Holland laid to rest as New Year rings in with rain in St. George, in this case, the rain being a good thing, it catches my attention. We have another one. This is also President Nelson, rain postponed. As President Russell M. Nelson concluded the prayer dedicating the site of the future Ephraim, Utah temple, rain began to fall. I also tend to think that this temple, for some reason, is important. Maybe it's the name, maybe it's the location. It's the only temple that President Nelson announced outside of General Conference, and it was his 70th temple that he announced. And he said that he received really strong, I can't remember how he worded it, but he received very clear direction and revelation from the Lord to announce this temple. So there's something special, I think, about the Ephraim, Utah temple. And then here's the most recent one with President Holland being buried on New Year's Day. So there's always people that like to just wave these things off, not think about them, not see anything special going on. They think that coincidences are just that, unless it's like really obvious and it's unexplainable and it's just in your face, that unless those are the circumstances, you can just ignore it. Well, we're looking at my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. This is currently row 111 for coincidences. And I have a lot of quotes from prophets and apostles and church leadership about so-called coincidences. That it is something that we believe in our church. Maybe not every little thing, but I like what Elder Bednar said here. This was a social media post, March 12th, 2024. You can pause and read the story here, but basically he ran into somebody at the store, and then he says, was it merely a coincidence that I encountered this good man at the local store? Or was this episode divinely orchestrated by a loving Savior who knew and responded to the concerns of a faithful man? A 1. You'll remember President Nelson's 99 plus 1. He continues, I believe that in the work of the Lord, there is no such thing as a coincidence. The worth of souls is great in the sight of God. So, yeah, maybe not every single thing, every single coincidence means something, but I feel like if it has to do with the church, if it has to do with the work of the gospel, it probably isn't a coincidence. When it comes to these temples, when it comes to President Holland, so on and so forth, I don't think it's coincidence. I also don't think it necessarily is the fulfillment of some big prophecy. It may not be a foreshadowing of things in the future, but the Lord is doing something for some reason. At the very least, highlighting significant events. It's something that you can look back to and have the assurance that the Salt Lake Temple truly is an important temple, that the Palmyra, New York temple and what it represents is truly significant. Especially the Palmyra, New York temple, because it's the closest temple to the Sacred Grove, where this dispensation began. Okay, we have this from Elder Garrett W. Gong. This was the April 2025 General Conference. The name of the talk is Eternity's Great Gifts, Jesus Christ's Atonement, Resurrection, Restoration. This one more has to do with special dates, but I still want to bring this up, especially since he points out this upcoming General Conference. He says, each Easter spring season testifies that spiritual sequence and convergence are both part of the divine pattern of atonement, resurrection, and restoration through Jesus Christ. This sacred and symbolic convergence comes not by accident or coincidence. Palm Sunday, Holy Week, and Easter celebrate Christ's atonement and resurrection. As today, every April 6th, we commemorate the establishment and organization of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This restoration is a reason we gather the first Sunday each April in General Conference. And then there's footnote 22 that goes along with this paragraph. The sacred anniversaries that occur each Easter season sometimes exactly coincide. For example, Easter and General Conference occur on the same Sunday in 2026. So it's interesting that he's pointing this out. That's this upcoming General Conference. Easter and General Conference occur on the same Sunday in 2026 and 2029. Palm Sunday and General Conference occur on the same Sunday in 2031 and 2034. Passover occurs near to Easter and during General Conference in 2026 and 2029. Regardless of whether or not these anniversaries coincide exactly, we understand that their convergent proximity is not by coincidence or accident. It is sacred and symbolic. So there really is reason to notice these things. It seems like church leadership does. He said that it's sacred and symbolic. Okay, and then lastly, my most recent quote for coincidences comes from this December 9th, 2025 Church News podcast. Episode 270, New Presiding Bishopric on Overseeing Temporal Affairs with a Spiritual Purpose. This is Bishop W. Christopher Waddell, presiding bishop. So many times we talk about coincidences, and to say I believe in coincidences, what that means is I know that God's hand is in the details. Things happen that you just say that couldn't happen on its own. I've seen that so many times in so many ways as things we've already discussed. So I love looking for things like this. At the very least, it testifies to me that God really is there, and this really is his church, and that he has a plan, that everything is perfectly planned. Everything is under his control. And that's a really comforting thought. And it's not the basis for my testimony, and I hope that it's not for yours, but it helps. I feel like it helps bolster and support your testimony when you can see the hand of God as he does his work. So, all right, well, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.